a generous benefactor of nonviolent peace fellows throughout the region. And we, in the project, the Religion, Conflict, and Peace Initiative, are also recipients of his vision and his generosity. And Sid, we just want to pause to say thank you, not only for your generosity, but for the witness that you represent in relationship to the hope for a much more hopeful and just future, which you embody in your work and in your generosity. So thank you so much, Sid. Okay, we'll turn it over. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to introduce Sivan Rajuan Shtang. What do I need to? Oh, hi, I'm Yael Berda. I'm visiting here at Harvard Sociology, and usually I'm at Hebrew University in sociology. Yeah, and this is a very important session for me. So I'm very happy to introduce Sivan Rajuan Shtang, who's a research associate at the Hadassah Brandeis Institute, and she is the head of the Visual Studies track at the Department of Cultural Studies, Creation and Production at Sapir Academic College, and she also lectures at Shinkar. She has a BFA in Fine Arts from the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design in Jerusalem, and a master's and PhD in hermeneutics and culture from Bar Ilan University, which is a story in itself. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask questions about how one conducts critical research within, very strong boundaries, institutional boundaries of where critique is delegitimized. I think that's a really interesting thing. But Sivan edited a book on visual culture in Israel, which was the first comprehensive academic anthology of visual culture for the Hebrew reader. And I think this is part of that work, somewhat. Okay, so please, welcome, Sivan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. You hear me? Not so many of you. I want to thank Professor Moore and Atalia, Hilary, and Rim for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here and to share my work with you. The crucial discussion on Zionist colonialism focuses on different forms of Judaization, the expulsion of the Palestinian people, land expropriation, etc. In my paper today, I discuss another aspect of Zionist colonialism, the racist practices against Mizrahi Jews, meaning communities that immigrated to Palestine and Israel from Arab and Muslim countries. Two main elements of this repression were modern secular movement of the European Zionism versus traditional and religious communities, an Ashkenazi elite that hold most of the resources and reproduces class hierarchies. Through a reading in artworks of three prominent contemporary Mizrahi artists, I'll present how they artistically respond to this political history. Lior Grady, Daphna Shalom, and Vered Nissim. Different types of plants, some tied together with a red ribbon and others gathered united, are presented in Lior Grady's photographic series, Bouquets. The bouquets are photographed against a dark blue velvet fabric of the sort associated with Jewish ritual articles. They combine plants used by Grady's community, Jewish Yemenites, in religious rituals such as Havdalah, for medicinal purposes, and that are also believed to possess mystical properties. Grady collected the plants basil, rue, gat, and myrtle in 2015 in the Yemenite neighborhoods in Israel, Palestine. Quote, I realized that I had to find the elderly women, that they will lead me to their gardens. I believe these women know how to extract the plant's medicinal potential. With his choice of photographic imagery, Grady sends us to the traditional use of plants by Yemenite women, and in choosing the medium of photography, Grady relates to the modern chapter of this tradition. In fact, just as photography is historically tied to the construction of national political arenas, so too is Grady's photographed subject. While the plants in his photos are associated with the ancient Jews Yemenite tradition, they are also arranged in modern scientific botanic composition. At the end of the 19th century, photography was scientific botany's main documentary tool, taking over from print, drawing, and etching. Botany was part of the practice of classification and codification that came to the fore with Enlightenment and was used as a mechanism for constructing modern national identities, reaching its peak in early 20th century racial doctrines. Both photography and botany were imported from Europe by Ashkenazi Zionists who used it to gain control over Palestinian territory. They practiced botanical and racial photography as a tool to capture a typical portrait of the plant or person in an attempt to capture its transcendental essence. As argued by historian Amos Morris Reich, Ashkenazi racial photography aimed its lens at native Palestinians, but also at Mizrahi Jews, with Yemenite Jews being the most racialized group among them. This is from Arthur Woodpin's book. Grady attributes the cultivation of the plants to the women in his community, and his description involves the discourse of double loss, testifying to a disconnection in the availability of common traditions and their agency. He had to search for the women and their gardens as well as their knowledge, which was lost to him, which was not passed to the next, his generation. Although Grady found the women and their gardens, they are absent from the photographs. Why indeed did Grady choose not to photograph the women he met? What are the relations between visibility and invisibility in the framework of this history? And how is the traditional rapture shown in the images Grady created? The cyanophyres and composition of the bouquet series refer to the beginning of the history of visual racialization of Mizrahi Jews in early Zionism. This history is tied to the political turn brought by the invention of photography, which also announces the arrival of cameras to Palestine, where photographers, European, took pictures of indigenous people, Palestinian, and as well as Arab Jews, as we see here. This history was documented with cameras and presented as accurate data, but in fact produced the initial descriptions of a symbolic intra-Zionist cultural violence, masked and hard to detect because its appearance undergoes continuous naturalization. I claim that this photographed history contributed to the reducing of the perception of Yemenite Jews in Palestine to a symbolic racial visual spectacle of a Mizrahi body that was situated beyond the boundaries of the political Zionist present. Those racialized borders became characteristic when applied to another classification, Gender. The borders were marked on the physical bodies of Jewish Yemenite women by concrete and symbolic violence. The Bouquet series symbolizes the story of Yemenite Jewish women in the period of the early settlement. Women captured by photography, situated within the limits of the period, political time and place, marked for them by Ashkenazi gaze, and women who were not photographed because they transgressed these limits. The principle guiding the hegemonic photography of Jewish Yemenite women derives from the Renaissance model painting tradition that normalizes feminine bodies as objects to be examined, measured, judged by the subject artists. This tradition is rendered in this photo, in which a young girl in traditional clothes is seen sitting on a raised chair before a group of Ashkenazi painters, students at the Zionist art school, Bezalel. The artist arranges the nature appearing before his gaze so that it will acquire meaning within an order of appearance that serves and supports his culture. Hence, the model is a resource, a raw material for creating images that will grant the painter symbolic social, economic, or cultural rewards. This tradition is also seen in this photo, in which 3 smiling Ashkenazi Bezalel art students stand in the place of the painter. Besides them, in the place of the model, is a woman in traditional Palestinian dress. This is because Zionist photographers used to photograph the Jewish settlers dressed in native clothing, Palestinian clothing, in order to produce visibility that links the Jewish biblical past to the Zionist Jewish present. All the women in this photograph stand in a row with their bodies facing the camera lens. Each one of them is in the midst of an action. In this respect, they stand in the same level in the order of power relation between photographer and model. He is the subject, they his object. However, the connotation implied in the action of the women create differences and hierarchy among them. The action of the Ashkenazi women at the photograph's left side are not detached from its surrounding working environment. In fact, the actual placing of the model is what justifies this working environment, whether indoors or outside in the open. Their gazes are turned toward the model, and they are seen in the midst of drawing her at the present time. Although the body and gaze of the model also face the camera, something meant to actualize subjectivity, the action she presents is detached from her work environment. As such, she invokes connotations of an action that is representational as opposed to actual. The contrast between present and past is further strengthened through her traditional as opposed to their modern clothing. In Hannah Arendt terms, the action of the model evokes human toil, the kind of survivalist labor connected to basic existential needs. This is opposed to the action of the women painters, which connote work and creation and are tied to the existence of culture. Taking into account that the period's art field served the Zionist project and that painting was perceived as a political act, the action of the Ashkenazi women were given a political value to go with the value of the work. The action of the Yemenite women is therefore linked in the photograph to signs of nature, that is, to the realm considered apolitical. Hence, any political potential that could be implicated in her action is blurred in sharp contrast with the actions of the women painters. Thus, visual divisions based on class, race, and gender construct a hierarchy between the Ashkenazi women, presented as situated within the Zionist political present, and Mizrahi women who are placed outside of it. Analysis of this photo presenting the figure of Yemenite Jewish women show that the real realm of the political present, itself framed with racialized boundaries by Zionist visual regimes, is even more significant in light of another classification: gender. Similarly to institutional museum displays dealing with Mizrahi Jewry since 1948, those photos also treat Mizrahi women as a central exhibitory element through which the entire Mizrahi Jewish culture is gendered. As Noah Chazan has shown, this feminization is used by Zionist institutional museums as a significant organization element and as a weak discursive position in the male-female binary. This situates Mizrahi Jews under the gendering markers of needness and constant dependence as opposed to Ashkenazi Zionist nationalism, which was formalized as a protective and redeeming male entity. Those racial and gendered power relations are visible in the photos of the Bezalel workshop drawing classes, which, to refer Grady's organic metaphor, expose the roots Grady sets at the center of the Israeli art field, one based on racial, familial, white, patriarchal relations. In a sense, the Bouquet series is this history untaken photograph. It marks the Zionist national naturalistic metaphor of the birth, rooting, growth with the bow of the nation, with both signs of symbolic and actual racial violence. The construction of Ashkenazi photographed visual regimes erased the marks of this violence. While Grady ties the bouquets, plants, to the Yemenite woman who still cultivates them in their gardens, and while the deep blue velvet ritualistic fabric on which the bouquets lie signifies continuation of tradition, the bouquets themselves are photographed separately, cut and uprooted, and thereby inducing connotation of grief and loss. Grady chose not to photograph the women in whose gardens he visited. Their absence recalled the Yemenite women who were photographed in Bezalel workshops and in the Jewish settlement field, as well as those who weren't photographed because they crossed the political boundaries of time and place marked out for them by the Zionist gaze. Its appearance would have damaged the unity of the Ashkenazi Zionist visual regime, exposing the violent conditions that enabled it. I will refer to those missing photographs through potential description of them, driven from the period, from testimonies written at that period. Poet Dan Almagor's poem, Dry Branches, which was censored time and again by Israeli authorities from the moment it was written, tells us the story of the Yemenite women and their photographs, those that weren't taken. The poet was written following a public lashing of Yemenite women by Ashkenazi landlord Yonatan Makob in Rehovot settlement in 1913. Photos of Yemenite women and men taken around that same year present them embodying the role assigned to them by the Ashkenazi artists or landlords. The untaken photographs tell the story of an unspoken language, the language of lashings, of lashing. At the center of the poem, the phrase, "he sees," repeats 4 times. Into the field of vision of the son of one of the beaten women enter harsh images of violence directed at a figure he recognizes, his mother. The poem marks the traces of a field of vision censored by the period photographers, as well as the violence establishing the Ashkenazi visual regime border between visibility and invisibility. Shulamit Levy describes the language of lashings as one used by the Ashkenazi landowners to show Yemenite young girls and women their place within the racial and gender role division. Quote, "The language of lashings was that most commonly used, along with shaming and humiliating, as in the case of the farmer N, who even hit women with his whip." According to Levy's account, when Yemenite women created a continuous line between the religious traditions of their life in Yemen and those of their lives in Palestine, for example, by following the Jewish law and biblical tradition of gleaning harvest leftovers, they were in fact trading between the safe territorial boundaries of their original tradition, which promote intra-class solidarity. However, to use Diane Moore's conceptualization of religion and situatedness as part of the new geopolitical context into which they arrived, the Zionist situated claim about land and work defined the Yemenite women as transgressors, that is, exactly in between territorial boundaries set according to an opposite logic, one of abandonment, which break through the flexible intra-class traditional boundaries and turns them into violent colonial boundaries. As mentioned, botanical practices of collecting, planting, classifying, and using the Palestinian flora were central to the attempt to realize national territorial validity. By transgressing the demarcation set for them by the Ashkenazi establishment, Yemenite women were actually placed on the same rank as its enemies, in that their acts were seen as threatening the role division between masters and slaves, in Smadar's Levy words. Young Yemenite girls and women who dared revolt were punished with violence, the white being both the intimidation marketing the border and the punishment for crossing it, which reduced their being to that of a body, situating them again in the role of nature that threatens the culture. This role division also set the logic and limits of the Zionist field of vision, as is seen in the photos of Yemenite women from the period. It is time to discuss the missing photographs, not those lost, but those never created, writes Ariela Azulay. The limits of the fields of vision as they arise from the early 20th century photos in which appear Yemenite Jews are those that avoid photographing them as subjects, as having complaints, and whether the archive prevents their appearance as such, the viewer can still participate in the events of the photography, in the event of photography, and change the terms of the appearance of the accusation.
מבדיל בין קודש לחול חטאתנו ימחול
ברוחת רוחה העולם המבדילה בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל העמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה ברוחת המבדילה. בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש לחול. ברוחת רוחה העולם המבדילה בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין ישראל העמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה ברוחת המבדילה. בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש, בין קודש לחול.
המבדיל, the video we just saw, is a part of the time-specific video series, a series of 6 video artworks created by Daphna Shalom. שירת הים, ערבית, המבדיל, and Fearful Days, a trilogy, all focus on transition rituals in the Hebrew calendar, on Jewish time and meaning circles, and on the dimension of passing time. Short transitions between day and night, night and day, week and week, and between layers of language, voice, and culture. They present rich religious spectacles characterized by a mismatch between sound and image and between material and the spiritual. Within the history of Zionism, Mizrahi people were given the role of the indigenous, authentic, biblical origin of Zionism, and that is thus as its essential source, but also as a goal against which Zionism has established itself as a modern project of repair and separation from the tradition. Shalom reconstructs her identity from her Mizrahi feminist internal perspective. The time-specific video series can be placed within the history of video art as an artistic medium that emerged during the 60s of the 20th century. Video art was immediately adopted by American women artists. The accessibility and mobility of its use and the potential of its groundbreaking expressions served the women artists who worked in parallel to the formation of radical feminism. They soon used video art as a male hegemony bypassing tool in the fields of creation, display, and distribution. At the same time, Jewish American women artists began to create video art that dealt with the disciplining of women bodies within Jewish law and costume, such as the laws of purity, impurity, and nida. They identified the medium's ritualistic elements, such as loop, out-of-sync vocal expressions of voice and image, speech, and gaze. Daphna Shalom takes a unique part in this process. Art historian Yael Gilad, who discussed Shalom's work, finds ritual foundation in it, but argues that within the artistic wave Shalom works, the projection of rituals is used for alienation. Other essays make the claim that elements related to holiness and religion appearing in the time-specific video series become spheres of power relations between the feminine subject and the hierarchical and patriarchal religious systems which excludes her. But these interpretations reduce the Jewish Mizrahi alternative Shalom offers. As Mizrahi Jewish history scholar Chaviva Pdaya claims, too often discussions on Israeli society are done through discourses developed mainly by European intellectuals who joined secularized Christian theological discourses. Thus, from my perspective, Shalom's work is an autonomous, immanent work that offers a feminist Mizrahi Jewish presence of voice and image, picture and speech, visual and musical performances that deterritorialize the secular Zionist time and space and hegemonic culture. It is an articulation of an intimate territory which has feminine, traditional, Jewish Arab cultural abundance. Shalom combines embodiments of language, material, color, sound, rhythm, and phonetics which connect us to the Jewish echo chamber, the one that has been removed by Zionism. And so, Hamavdil opens with 70 seconds of silence against a dramatic background of a burning chair. Out of the silence, a voice emerged with a clear Mizrahi accent, with a het and ein, the lingual element that linked between Arabic and Hebrew languages, that has been deleted from the spoken Hebrew to separate and deny any connection to Arab identity. Like a shofar that opens sky gates, the voice of Mizrahi vocalist Victoria Hannah becomes empowered, intensified, and thickened. The moment Hannah utters her voice is also the moment when the Jewish Arab sound is heard, signifying a common space. The nonverbal sound and music, claimed Pdaya, are the first features of a shared social space. Many of the first-generation Jewish immigrants from Arab and Islam countries were in a state of muteness and shock, and thus the voice of the common Arab-Jewish space was withdrawn and swallowed into itself. In Fearful Days 2 and 3, Arvit and Hamavdil, the tension between muteness and speech breaks down again and again. In Hamavdil, there are transitions between silence and voice, oblivion and memory, exile and redemption are decided when Victoria Hannah's voice is heard. In her article, The Piyut as a Dream and a Window, Pdaya writes that the Piyut as a Dream brought the melody of the Arab-Jewish space to the Israeli space that could not contain its makams, its quarter tones, and its trills, and thus caused its extinction. Shalom creates conditions for a grand, breathtaking appearance of this voice, indicating that even if a moment of oblivion of the Arabic language has been created, the old musical pulse continues beating with the accent, phonetics, or silence that Mizrahi Jewish women carry from the East on the continuum of Arab-Jewish time and space. During the last 25 years, Mizrahi feminists challenged Ashkenazi feminism with questions regarding class, ethnicity, and gender. These challenges resonate in Verd Nissim's work through the figure of her mother, which constantly appear in her daughter's artwork. To these challenges, Nissim adds another axis, that of sexuality. Nissim expropriates the Ashkenazi gaze on Mizrahi women who mark her, as Edward Said puts it, as a site of boundless fertility and sexual promise. Nissim embodies this power and visual relation through erotic, humorous, but also melancholic visual expressions that enable her to transform oppression practices into practice of desire and pleasure. She rebels the heteronormative national Ashkenazi order, which instructs her to part with the mother and with the tradition as a condition for the development of a normative sexuality and citizenship. Instead, Nissim operates out of her own tradition, family, and community without parting or assimilating within them completely. Nissim drains into her work the same fears of identification and distinction, repetition and difference, which shape the intergenerational relationship between her and her mother to the image of the bride and to the Mizrahi wedding scene. Through her performances as a bride, Nissim presents tensions and complexities between devoting herself to her mother's tradition and separating from her, and between asserting it in a new meaning and context. Nissim repeatedly marks herself in the role of the bride, but one that does not marry or function, and in fact, as a bride who creates a complete alienation of the social convention of the wedding. In the video, A Desert Within a City, Nissim appears in a white dress, her body frozen as in a catatonic state, and she's silent throughout the film. Her mother and father carry her in the dunes of her childhood town, Holon, under the blazing sun, on a journey that leads them nowhere, to a destination that doesn't seem to exist, and in any case, one they do not reach. In the video, Dying to Dance in Your Wedding, Nissim's parents are seen in series of scenes, attending a Mizrahi wedding that doesn't take place. They welcome the guests, eat burekas, chicken and fish, and dance to Mizrahi music. On the background, the bride's family picture, Vered, her mother and father. But the bride doesn't attend her own wedding, nor does the groom. The central place of the wedding and the bride in the context of the relationship between Nissim and her mother becomes clearer in the scene we'll see now from the video. If I tell you the stories of my life, tears come out of my eyes.
בדד אלך, גם תפילה אין לי, בדד בלי תקווה ובלי חלום. יש אנשים, לה 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 נשמה. יש עננה ושמש לילה לילה יש אונייה אין לי כוח, אין לי כוח אהבה נגילה אהבה, נגילה אהבה, נגילה ונשמחה, אהבה נרננה, אהבה נרננה, אהבה אהבה ושמחה.
Nisim's mother lands on the sidewalk, wearing a white dress, but one made of old-fashioned sponge rugs. She scrubs a carpet of yellow cleaning gloves, known from other works of Nisim, and talks about the difficulties of her life and hard work of cleaning, the desire to give education to her children, and the sacrifice of her life for them as her body moved between crying, dancing, and singing. The daughter is silent again throughout the video, gazing at her mother from above with a hard, cold look and vertical, phallic, sovereign body expression. A phallic performance is highlighted by the verticality of the leather and by her arms holding the funnel that liquid on her mother. Through the phallic spilling, Nisim produces for her mother more and more of the humiliating work. While marking her mother as enslaved to this work, she marks herself as liberated from it as she holds the green funnel in her hands and raises her head as if she was the statue of liberty. And as she spills liquids on her mother's body, she gives us the impression that she is getting sexual satisfaction from the perpetuation of her enslavement. Nisim, who photographed herself as the Statue of Liberty in the photograph Liberty, embodies in front of her mother the liberal, feminist, Ashkenazi stance, but in an ironic fashion. Unlike the white modernist national and universal approach, whose main practice is the rejection of tradition, of the traditional community, while sanctifying the action of the rational individual, man or woman, the connection between Nisim and her mother is full of complexities, contradictions, and tensions. When Nisim punishes her mother for the inheritance she delivered her, but builds more and more stages for the delivery process, and when she seeks to put a limit to her world flowed with her mother's pain, but hardly separates from her, she actually denies the dichotomous imperative to part with her mother and from her world or to assimilate with it. She favors the border work between them as a spring of creation and as a work assumption. For example, when Nisim's mother gets up on the sidewalk and goes through tears and mourning expressions of her life into dancing and singing, she sings to her daughter in Arabic, and the Mizrahi wedding and henna ceremonies hit, Gina o Gina o Gina, which means we came to bring the bride. She recalls the emotionally charged moment when the mother and her family separate from the daughter. In front of her singing, dancing mother, Nisim's cold, stiff expression melts, and for a moment, she looks like as if she really was a bride at a Mizrahi wedding, sitting on the shoulders of her guests and smiling at them while they cheer her up. I'm over. Thus, Nisim's acceptance of her mother's cries of hope on the one hand, and her abstention to realize that hope, the enslavement of the daughter's artwork to enable her mother voicing that Ashkenazi history does not want to hear, and the enslavement of the mother to her daughter's border work, the transition between melancholic and humoristic expressions. Through all of this, Nisim marked the challenge of many of us, the third generation Mizrahi women, who, as Mizrahi feminist theorist Henriette Dahan-Kalev puts it, want to strive to improve our status within the framework in which we are given, without breaking apart the social, cultural family system within which we gave form our identity and through which we experience meaning and most importantly, from which we draw strength and hope. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
So I see a lot of this art that you describe as like in conversation with the Ashkenazi world and the expectations put on Mizrahi people. Do you see this art as also being in conversation or like longing for the rest of the Middle East and like a connection between Mizrahi Jews and countries of origin or just the people around them who might share some of the culture and background?
Do you mean if I see longing for connection with the broader Arab? I think that yes. I'm talking. I mean, these artists are our colleagues and friends, and we are a small community of crazy people. Like Noam yesterday showed us the temperament of this community, and we talk about it, and I talk about it many times here with people that Israel. We live in this place called, by many people, Israel, and we are citizens over there, and we can walk, we can move in this place, in this space, but it's very, very small. It's 1 hour, right? 1 hour and a half. How long?
Depends where you consider it.
Yeah, it depends where. So you can't meet or go nowhere around this place. And I think also my mother, she would really like to go and see her home at Iraq. I think every Mizrahi, all the Mizrahi people want to be connected again to their origins, and also the young generation are really want that, and we see it in the work of people like Chen El Malik and Noam and other artists that try to make connections, although the condition we live in. I'm trying to answer somehow.
Questions?
Maybe I have a short question about. Do you hear me? Yeah. Like for me, Sivan is the first time I saw. I don't know how, but Daphne Shalom is the first time I saw it, and like the way, and it also like connected to what Rebecca just asked. Like, of course, I agree that there is a motivation to go back and to think about the history and etc. But I just wonder, maybe it's not a question, I just wonder whether the political condition, like under those political conditions, either only certain kind of Mizrahi Jews that have the privilege to do so can practice it. And that's why and we talked about it also, that's why most of the Mizrahi Jews can't think and actually fear of thinking about themselves as an Arabs, because the political conditions are different. They're different in a way that forcing them to join security apparatuses and etc. So in that sense, like I think, and I'm also asking your opinion, I think that, yeah, it's a really important vision and direction, and we should keep it in spite of everything, we should keep it, but by the same time, I think it's a bit of a privileged position to tell all Mizrahi Jews why you are not doing that, because the political condition not allow them. We have to speak about the political condition and to put into consideration the privilege of Ashkenazi people in order to understand why Mizrahi Jews have this fear and why they have to recruit recruit actually to the army, but recruit also consciously to the Zionist project? I don't know if it's a question, but maybe you or Yael. Yael also
So
might.
actually,
Yael
I do want to intervene
Yeah,
here
yeah.
because, I mean, there is a structuring of Mizrahi memory through law. Through law, there's the new law. It's so these laws are being structured in tandem. So while the memory of the Nakba is being suppressed by law, criminalized basically, you have the memory of the plight of Mizrahi Jews in Arab countries being commemorated in a particular way. So the Day of Remembrance is in the law is defined as the events of the flight and exile of the Arab countries. Therefore, kind of solidifying that memory as one of people leaving in fear to safety. Also, it's being structured, this is for economic reasons, to prepare the case for when there will be reparations. So reparations to Mizrahi Jews that left the Arab countries will stand against the reparations instead of the right of return. Now, and this is articulated. So we have all this set, so this is in the background. And then you do have these voices that are breaking out. And I think so maybe the question of privilege on one hand, I mean, I think it's useful practically, but maybe more intellectually. So how do you think this work is, what is this work trying to do against the structure or the legal and social structure and political structure that is trying to place this memory in a particular form?
I think it's different from one work to the other. I mean, Lior Grady's work, and he had a historical exhibition, from my perspective, on the Kinneret Yemenites history, the history of it. It's something that is even before. It's the history from the beginning of the 20th century, things that happened even before all the 48 stuff. And so I lost my so
No, so
depends.
Grady
So
works with the territorial also.
Yeah.
You said it was a deterritorializing project. And I found that really interesting. And I think that's what Grady's trying to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the things about these discussions is that they're very complex internally, because every place you go, you kind of hit a wall, in the sense that speaking from the perspective of Mizrahi Jews, and I think it's true, like people say, wait a minute, but where are the Palestinians in this story? And the truth is that it's not part of the conversation. It's distance. And if it is part of the conversation, it is always through other kinds of agency, right? So like through Iraqi memory or Maghrebi memory or something like that, but it's never directly related. And I think that you can kind of see it here, right? There's this, it's like a sound in the background, but it's still absent.
Yeah, it is. But I think I see in this work like something we talk about when these claims are when
Addressed.
The class claims, the claim about class and about racialization of Mizrahi Jew, will be addressed, and Mizrahi people can move, maybe move on the political arena, and they are stuck now on on the right wing, because of maybe the economical position. And it's hard for me in English. I can't.
את יכולה בעברית ואני אתרגם.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sivan, for the presentation. It was great. So I'm wondering about in the Mavdil video, the Daphna Shalom, I think, video. There's a woman singing like traditional, Jewish ritual, and I in Boston have been part of creating like egalitarian Mizrahi ritual spaces, which is not really happening too much in the world, but it's happening in Boston. So I'm curious about like the tension in that piece of both holding on to the like historical connection to family. You said something about like the Mizrahi artist wanting to still feel that connection to the family systems, and integrating like feminism and a reality where women are able to lead. So I'm just curious to hear about that tension a little bit more in the art.
אני בעברית, אני אתרגם, אין בעיה.
I'm too, איך אומרים כזה, מתרגש? Anxious, yeah. I think actually Daphne Shalom created this series of video art with her brother, and he's a musician, and they created these. They wrote and הלחינו כאילו. Composed a new ritual. Also, it's.
The language is all feminine language.
Yeah, the language is feminine. They created something new, and they want to relate to the tradition and to the religion practices. That Daphne Shalom talks about praise that she was praying all the time with her father when she was a child, and she remembers that so strongly. It's such a huge part of her identity, and even a material part of her body. So she feels that this is like she has to do that. She has to create a space and conditions for the new appearance of this tradition and history. So she creates it anew also with her own, with the new perspectives. She owns as a Mizrahi feminist and so on. Yeah.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank
This
you
was so
very much.
illuminating.